So today we have another budget CPU coming through that we're going to test on some modern games to see just how well it stacks up in today's market. Now this is the last budget CPU I have on hand, unless you count the 8350 from AMD, so this is probably the last budget CPU testing that we'll have for a while. But if you do like these types of videos that test old hardware, let me know in the comments down below and I'll keep sort of looking for older GPUs as well as CPUs to test. Now today we have the Phenom II 1055T, which is a 6-core processor clocked at 3.2 gigahertz, and the multiplier on this processor is locked out of the box. However, you can still base clock overclock this particular model. And doing just that, I was able to get the frequency up to 3.8 gigahertz completely stable without going too overboard on the voltage. I could have shot for a slightly higher overclock, but that would have required more voltage and then of course more heat, and I didn't really feel like running this processor over 80 degrees C. Aside from the processor change, we have roughly the same platform. We still have 4 gigabytes of RAM. However, this time, just because of what I had laying around, it is ran at 1600 megahertz instead of 1333. And then of course we have the same graphics card we've been working with, which is the GTX 660. Now going into these graphs, it's worth pointing out, for those of you that may not know, the Phenom II has a pretty solid multi-core performance in any sort of synthetic testing because it has 6 cores. However, its single core performance is lacking compared to the 860K, and especially considering the G3258. So I just wanted to point that out for those of you that are looking to buy this processor potentially for games that I didn't test today. Look at those games and find out whether they are largely single-threaded games or if they use multiple cores, especially 4 or more cores, very well. If they use many cores pretty well, then the Phenom II will probably do okay with that game. And if it is largely just a single-threaded game that really only uses 1 core really well, then the Phenom II is definitely not going to perform that well. So let's go ahead and take a look at our test games and see just how well the Phenom II stacks up. Okay, jumping into today's testing, we're looking at the orange bar where the Phenom II 1055T was run at 3.8 gigahertz along with the 860K, and the G3258, the blue bar there, was run at 4.5 gigahertz. League of Legends seems to be a lot more of a single-threaded hog than some of the other games on the testing, resulting in the Phenom II falling behind the other two. Still averaging 88 FPS, very playable, 1% low at 53, and 0.1% low was at 42. Now, being that League of Legends is not exactly a fast-paced game as far as esports games go, it's not a bad frame rate at all and still gives you a very good experience. Overwatch was next up, and we averaged 99 FPS with a 1% low of 62 and a 0.1% low of 23. Again, that single-threaded performance seems to be hurting the Phenom II in this particular title. Moving on to Skyrim, all 3 of these processors give us a nearly identical experience, all averaging 60 FPS. The Phenom II mustered a 1% low of 53 and a 0.1% low of 26. Just like the other 3 processors, it was a great experience playing the game. And moving on to GTA 5 on normal settings with anti-aliasing off, this game proves to be a problematic game for older processors, and the Phenom II was no exception here. It did average 55 FPS, and it was what I would call barely playable, considering that its 1% low was at 24 and its 0.1% low was clear down at 10. There was definitely some stuttering going on, but I do think with lowering some of those settings a little bit further, you could get those frame rates a little bit higher and make the game playable, whereas the G3258 was just a complete mess and what I would consider not playable and probably not even salvageable at all, but definitely a win here for the 860K. Now, considering the results of the testing and the platform cost, I would continue to recommend the 860K over both the G3258 and the 1055T. It just gives you a greater amount of flexibility than the G3258, even though the Intel part does outperform it in certain games. The 860K gives us playable games on the high end like GTA 5, whereas the 3258 and even to an extent the 1055T struggle to make a playable experience there. So there you have it. If you have a Phenom II already, probably from an older system, then you might be able to hang on to it for just a little bit longer before you really need to upgrade. However, I really don't see a purpose to ever buying this processor used if you're building a budget PC, because there are better options out there. That being said, for any of you that are running one of these Phenom II processors, whether it be the quad cores or the 6-core processors like the 1055T or the 1090T, let me know in the comments down below, and let me know how your gaming performance is in 2017, and are you considering an upgrade soon. And as always, if you like this content, give me a like, share, subscribe down below. All those things help out a lot. You can follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. They are the same tag for your convenience. And as always, we'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. Ding! I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.